was All Black number 871. He debuted for the All Blacks as a baby black in 1986 against the French. He went on to play 92 test matches, 51 of them as captain, a truly great All Black. And it's a real pleasure to welcome onto the pod from the UK, where he now lives, Sean Fitzpatrick. Fitzy, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you, Nisbett. Good to hear your voice.
Sean, let's go back to the early days. You were the son of a former All Black, Brian Fitzpatrick, of course. Did that put any pressure on you at all because you were a son of an All Black when you were a young fella?
I didn't really think too much about it, Nisbett. It was sort of, you know, in those days you couldn't buy replica jerseys, all those sort of things. So, you know, and Dad wasn't big on sort of talking about the All Blacks really in his time and being an All Black. He retired very young through injury. But, you know, the Kevin Skinners and the Keith Davis and those sort of people would come around sort of every week. And as a young boy, you wouldn't really think too much about it. So, no, Dad didn't put any pressure on us. We all played rugby, and that's what we did in those days. You know, in terms of rugby, it was very much the heart and soul of the community. And, you know, our life was around rugby. Dad coached at College Rifles. You know, I used to go down as a 3, 4, 5-year-old to support my brother's team. I was the team mascot. Mum ran the tuck shop. We'd go, you know, I can always remember, it sort of brings back memories of sitting in front of the fire on Friday night, cleaning our boots, putting them full of newspaper and putting them in front of the fire, then nailing our sprigs into the boots, and Dad sort of reading the paper there, having a beer, sort of keeping an eye on us, making sure that we were doing the right thing, and then waking up at sort of 7 o'clock in the morning to listen to the ZB cancellations, hoping that we weren't going to be cancelled, and then piling into Dad's Zephyr and heading down to College Rifles, all of us. And we'd spend the whole day there, you know, and you know, then we'd watch the senior team play, and I'd, you know, want to be Grant Batty or Gareth Edwards, and all the kids would be outside, you know, sort of reminiscing about those sort of things. And then, you know, we'd head off home, stop at the dairy by the 8 o'clock, play spot the ball, and you know, that was our Saturday. Fantastic.
Fantastic. So who were your rugby heroes? You were born in 1963, so I guess by the late 60s, early 70s, you had a string of rugby heroes. Who were some of those blokes?
I think of, you know, playing in the backyard. You know, Brian Williams was a real sort of icon in terms of those big side steps, and we'd all try and, you know, get a metre sort of side step. But I suppose probably the first sort of memory of me watching the All Blacks was sort of late 60s, early 70s. I think the Lions tour had a real sort of effect on me to see these players like, you know, Barry John, Gareth Edwards, those sort of players really sort of stuck in my mind. I thought Gareth Edwards was just, you know, he was just so far ahead of his time. And so the Lions was a big part of my sort of upbringing. And then, you know, waking up in the morning, it's sort of 3 o'clock in the morning with Dad to watch the All Blacks in the UK in the early 70s, you know, the singing at Cardiff Arms Park. And that was just my brother and I and Dad, that's what we did. And, you know, then South Africa, I think South Africa 76 was a tour that I sort of really remember. I remember, you know, seeing those sort of brown fields and Joe Morgan scoring that try in Bloemfontein. Really, for some reason, really stuck in my mind. And so, you know, South Africa was, in those days, you know, our greatest foe, I suppose.
So you went to Sacred Heart. Did you ever think, as you were getting a little older, that one day I'm going to be an All Black? That's my goal. I want to be an All Black.
I think, you know, when Dad sort of said to me, my brother and I, you know, every afternoon, my brother and I would have a test match out on the back lawn, you know, kicking the ball around, passing, doing all those sort of things. And I can remember Dad saying to us, look, boys, you don't have to play rugby union. Just make sure you play team sport and make sure you enjoy it. And I think that's probably the best advice I got. And I was a large kid. I was a bit overweight. So I never, ever played with my mates. I was always, because in those days you just hopped on a set of scales and whatever weight you were, that was the team you played in. So I was always playing with older kids. So I never played in the A team. I was always the B, the C, or the D team. And that literally happened right through until I was about 15, really. and so I was a prop, and I think probably around 15, 16, I started to show a bit of potential. I had natural ability. I was overweight. I didn't train particularly hard, but I had natural ability, and I played in the North Island under 16s, and then the New Zealand under 16s. I was reserved to a guy called Tony Flavel, who played for America, the hooker, and then under 18s. And I suppose I played third grade. Murray Deaker was our coach. And the old Deeks was our coach, which was wonderful. And Mark Greatbatch was in the team, Ronnie Williams, Chevelle, those sort of players. And I still didn't think I was good enough. I captained the Auckland third grade, I think. And Drakey, I can always remember Drakey, your good mate Drakey. He came to Sacred Heart in my last year at school there, and 81 it was, and we got selected for the New Zealand secondary schools. But John Graham then said, right, there'll be no schoolboy rugby this year because of the Springbok tour. So we were a paper team, basically. And I can always remember we went down to the Marist Club, Sacred Heart First 15, went down to the Marist Club because being a good Catholic boy, that's where we should all go and play. And I can remember Drakey coming out to Sacred Heart one Thursday night and said, I'd like you boys to come down to the University Club on Saturday. We went, oh, okay. And I can always remember going to Marist and we had to wear a tie and we drank orange juice, sang the club song when the team came in. And then the following Saturday, we went to the University Club at Drakey and we had beers. It was fantastic. And I said, Drakey, this is the club I want to come to. And it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made. And I still look back at those club years. And I played third grade and then obviously moved into the senior team. But it was some of the best rugby I was involved in, that Gallagher Shield team, and with Foxy and David Kirk and all these people. Was wonderful. And our coach was the one Graham Henry. And so I was a tight head prop, and Drakey was sort of monitoring me coming through the third grade. I played New Zealand Colts as a prop. And then Drakey sort of said to me, he said, Fitzy, you're not big enough to be a tight head. And I don't know if he saw me as a threat or not.
Yes, I was going to say.
And he said, you need to be a hooker. You need to be a hooker. Well, because he'd just come back from France, and the scrummaging technique was three props in the front row. And that's what Drakey wanted. And once again, it was probably the best decision I ever made.
So conversion to hooker meant you had to throw the ball in. And I believe you had a few issues for a season or two. Yes,
it was sort of tough love, really. And our other great mate, Andy Hayden, who sadly passed away a couple of weeks ago, I was recounting his tough love to me. And he literally, Drakey just said, because I'm playing for university, I just used to throw the ball in, and anyone who caught it was a good throw. And McDermott and those guys, they didn't give a toss how good the throw was, just get on with it. So I never learned how to throw the ball in properly. I went away on an Auckland tour in 1983. Harty selected me. I can still remember he rang my flat. We were having a party or something, and my flatmate said, "Oh, John Hart's on the phone." And I mean, I don't be so bloody stupid. Harty wouldn't be calling me. And it was Harty, and he invited me to go on the 83 Auckland tour to Europe. And I can still remember being in Singapore, and on our way north, and we stopped at the army camp there. And I was throwing the ball into this line-out that had Gary Wett and Alan Wett and Glenn Rich, Andy Hayden, Drakey, Steve McDowell. I'm like, oh my God, this is stressful. So I started throwing to Andy, and Andy had about 5 throws. And, Matafa Keenan had 1 throw at university. Matafa just had 1 throw. That was it. It was easy. Glenn Twentyman at the front of the line-out had 1 throw. Andy had 5 different throws. And I was like, my God, Andy, I'm a builder. I'm not a mathematician. And throw it in. He said, that's not right. Come here. He went over and he drew in the mud as if it was yesterday. I can still remember him drawing in the dirt. He said, this is the arc I want. This is my flat throw. This is my lob. Then again, he threw the ball back at me and he went, not right, get it right. And I threw it in again, and he pulled me over and he said, come over here, kid. You see that guy over there, Ian Abercrombie? go and tell him that he's playing on Saturday. Bugger off. and that was it. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And Drakey pulled me aside one night. We'd played Marist, and Kevin Boyle had absolutely killed me in the scrums. And I said, Drakey, I'm going to play up north. Peter Sloane's asked me to go and play for Northland. And I'm going. And he's going to pay me 10 grand a year to be a builder up there. And I thought, wow, yeah. And Drake said, don't be so bloody stupid. You're not going anywhere. Go and ask that guy, Kevin Boyle, to teach you how to throw the ball. And went over to Boyle. He was standing there. I said, hi, Kevin, my name's Sean Fitzpatrick. I played against you tonight. Could you teach me how to throw the ball in? And he went, bugger off. And I came back and I said to Drake, he told me to bugger off. He said, did you buy him a beer? I said, no. He said, go and buy him a jug of beer and ask him again. So I went back, here, Kevin. Here's a jug of beer. Could you teach me how to throw the ball in? He said, meet me in front of the stand at the Auckland Domain on Monday night at 5 o'clock and bring your own ball. And I went there on Monday night in front of our stand, and Kevin was there. And Boyle, to his credit, 40 weeks that year, every Monday night we were there throwing the ball in. And about November time, guess who showed up? Andy Hayden. He said, kid, I've heard you've been doing a bit of work. I'd like to help you also. So the tough love worked.
Yeah, sure did. All right, let's fast forward a bit. It must have worked to the point where you came into national prominence, Sean, in 86, the Baby Blacks. And, you can probably remember it like it was yesterday. I certainly can. But you weren't even down to start in that game. So what were the circumstances behind you actually starting?
Well, I went to the trials, and Ian Abercrombie was the hooker for Auckland, and out of the blue they selected me. I think I was in the north and Abbo was in the south team, and they named the team. It was Bruce Samara and me, and I was totally shocked, not thinking I was good enough to even be anywhere near the All Blacks. And then Brucey got injured at training, and he popped a rib cartilage. And I can still remember Brian Lahore coming into my bedroom on the Friday morning, and he said, Brucey's not going to make it, so you're going to start. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, are you for real? And BJ had a bit of faith in me because he'd coached me at sort of under 16s and the under 21s. So he sort of had an idea. But we were like a bunch of kids in Nisbett, as you say, you remember. I think probably 10 of us made our test debuts that day. And we didn't know. And I can always remember BJ saying on the Monday or Tuesday when we assembled, he thought we had no chance in the world of getting anywhere near the French. And he said by Friday, he had a bit of faith that we could do the job. And I still to this day, I don't know how we beat them. I can remember being in the changing room, and they at Lancaster Park, and they walked past. We had our door open. We were sort of in a huddle, and Kirky was trying to inspire us. And I remember looking at as Rodriguez, their number 8, walked past and sort of snarled at me, growled at me, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's Rodriguez!" And that's literally what it was like. They had Philippe Sella, Blanco, and I can remember the first scrum, Kevin Borovich, myself, and McGrath, and got literally picked up, spewed out, thrown away, and we just carried on. Burrow sort of pulled me away, and we had another go. But it was just, I suppose, that was the power of the All Black jersey, really. And Brian did such a phenomenal job. I remember walking into his bedroom that morning. He's presented the jerseys to all of us, and I'd never. As I said, you couldn't buy a jersey. The only way you got an All Black jersey in those days was being an All Black. And to walk into that room and for BJ to hand me my jersey, and he said to me, "You're All Black number 871. Congratulations. Make sure you make a mental note the first time you pull on this jersey, and every other time, recall that feeling." And I tried to do that. And I always remember just walking out the door. And as I was walking out, I went, "Oh, Fitzy, there's one other thing." I said, "Well, what's that, BJ?" Clutching my jersey. He said, "You're expected to win." Which I still love today. I expect the All Blacks to win every time they play.
Yeah, I think we all do, to be perfectly honest. Well, he must have been, as a former All Black great himself, he must have been an inspirational character, not only to get you guys up in 86, the Baby Blacks, but then, of course, the next year was World Cup, first ever World Cup, 1987. And I guess a stroke of luck for you again, because Andy Dalton got injured, so you played a massive part in that tournament.
Yeah, it was quite weird. Ironically, BJ, when we assembled in Auckland for that opening game against the Italians, I think we assembled on the Tuesday or Wednesday of the World Cup, and BJ had been snowed in on his farm. He couldn't get out of the Wairarapa, so he didn't have a coach. And Andy took training, and for some reason we decided to do Henny Mullers to get fit for the World Cup, I suppose. That's how it was in those days. And Andy, I can remember looking at the distance, Andy would have been 30 yards ahead of me, and he grabbed his hamstring, and that was sort of, once again as if it was yesterday, and that was sort of the end of Andy's tournament. But to his credit, he was unbelievable. You know, there's not many people that would have gone through that tournament like he did. We didn't bring another hooker in. We had Steve McDowell covered hooker. So I ended up playing in every game. It was a stroke of luck, but I always remember how good Andy was to me personally, and which was wonderful. And we had an amazing team. It was, you know, you talk about BJ. He made some tough calls in that team. You know, you look at '86. We were in a bit of disarray in '86, and he got rid of a lot of players that would have loved to have been involved in the first World Cup. Made some tough decisions, brought in some young kids. And I just think the style of rugby we played in that tournament, Nisbett, no one had really sort of seen, you know, no one had seen a flanker like Michael Jones being able to do, you know, what he was doing.
Yeah, I remember Drakey telling me, Sean, that he felt so confident going into that final. I think he might have even mentioned you. He might have said to you, look, we might as well not even play this game. We are so much better than France.
I think the French, you know, what happened in '86 against the French, I think that was, you know, that's a team we wanted to play again. As you know, we sort of remember our losses more than anything else. And that was a real thorn on our side, what happened in Nantes in '86. And they'd probably, once again, as it happens in many World Cups, have played their final the Saturday before against the Australians. But yeah, I think we were pretty confident. You know, people say to me, what did you feel like after winning the final? It was like a relief, really, you know, to have, you know, playing the first World Cup in New Zealand in front of our own crowd, our own fans. It was really important that we won, I suppose. And so it was an added pressure. But yeah, we were pretty confident. I think everyone was very good at what they did in terms of their own positions. And we didn't have a lot of injuries other than Andy. You know, I don't think any other, you know, guys got injured. We had great backup. I look at the team that, you know, that played against Argentina in that last pool game. You know, Zinni and Bernie and those sort of players just added so much. Mark Brooke-Cowden, you know, that don't really get a lot of a mention in that World Cup team. They just added so much. Can I tell you a little story about after that game? And BJ, this is why he was so good in terms of building that team culture. We hopped on the bus after Argentina. We were meant to be heading down to down to Lancaster Park, Christchurch, to play the Scots in the quarterfinal. And BJ said, right, we're going to pop over to my local pub in Ekatahuna, I think it was, where it's called the Lakeview, and we're going to have a few beers with the locals. We thought, bloody hell, that's a nice way to spend a Sunday. so with that, we arrived at the Lakeview pub, and there's all these utes parked outside with barking dogs, bales of hay on the back. Walk into the pub and it's full, mum and dad and the kids. So we're having a pint, and then BJ sort of taps the glass and says, you know, thank you for everyone joining us today. It's wonderful to be here. Now, here's the list. Fitzpatrick and Lowe, you're with the Harvey family. And we're like, what? He said, yeah, you're being billeted for a night. Right, go and grab your bags and jump in the car. So I can remember Lowie and I sitting in the back of this ute, bottling off down the road. You know, the kids were and it was just wonderful, sleeping in two single beds. Just absolutely brilliant, a stroke of genius by him. And, you know, we all came together on Monday and headed off to Christchurch, but a wonderful example.
Yeah, the magic of BJ Lahore. Of course, he retired at the end of the World Cup as coach, and Griswali came in. 88, 89, even 90, a very good All Black team, wasn't it?
I think I look at that 88 team and in 89, especially when we came up here, no one could get near us, and we just, we were very dedicated. Most of us were all still working, but we wanted to be the best. And, that tour in 88 to Australia, where I can still remember that game at Ballymore when Foxy missed that final kick. We should have been nowhere near them. I think they got out to about a 14, 16-point lead. In those days, that was a lot. And for us to come back and end up drawing the game. And we were so disappointed with our performance. And then to go to Sydney the following week and beat them so convincingly. In 89 up here, that was a great tour up here, being back in Wales at the moment with the Scarlets and going to Stratty Park and those sort of places. That was one of the great tours, I think, because, we hadn't done that before, to travel around the valleys and then go to Ireland and have that sort of bus tour around Ireland, playing a few games here and there, was just wonderful. And as you said, and in 98, I think we sort of possibly started to take our position for granted. I think because in those days, the best players played every game. And I just think we got a bit fat and lazy probably. And by 91, the Australians had overtaken us, and without us even knowing, really. I can't remember doing any analysis of Phil Kearns. I thought I was the best hooker in the world. Little did I know that little fat Phil Kearns was much better than me.
Well, of course, that brings up, there was a lot of controversy around that time. We had the Bring Back Bark, and we had Grizz Wiley joined by John Hart, two guys who couldn't be any different, if you like. In 1991, they were sort of co-coaches, and I think you'd be the first to admit it didn't really work.
No, I'm just reading a book, believe it or not, Nisbett. I'm actually reading a book at the moment, and it talks about cohesive organisations, and the best cohesive organisations win. And that's when you look at 88, 89, we're a very cohesive team, and it worked. Where in 91 we weren't cohesive. We had a lot of changes, people coming in and out, whether it be coaches, players. There's a disharmony, and it wasn't an environment that we were going to be successful in. And I think we learnt from that. It took a while, but me personally, I definitely learnt from that. I think I became a better player. I was fitter, faster, stronger in sort of 92 to 97. And that was purely through, a reflection on what happened in 1991. And I'm the first one to admit that I probably got it wrong in 91. And I was lucky that I was given another opportunity where, some of my mates that were the greatest All Blacks I played with weren't given that opportunity.
Did you think in 1992 when Laurie Mains came in, it's fair to say that Laurie wasn't greatly enamoured with Aucklanders for whatever reason. Did you think you were going to survive that?
No, I didn't. He literally rang me up, and I'd had this discussion with Harty in 95, at the end of 95. I can remember Harty turning up there and asking me if I wanted to play in 96, and I wasn't certain that I wanted to play after what happened in 95, and Hardy sort of gave me the confidence to go forward, and we had an amazing relationship. In 92 it was a lot different, where Laurie rang me out of the blue and he said, hi Sean, it's Laurie Mains here. He said, do you want to be an All Black again? As if it was yesterday. I keep on saying that because it feels like it was yesterday. And I said, Laurie, I'd love to be an All Black again. And he said, well, you're probably not going to be. Literally like that, as Laurie would. And Laurie said, firstly, you're too fat. Secondly, you're too slow. Thirdly, you're bloody arrogant. And the thing that hurt me most of all, he said, you've lost the respect of the All Black jersey. He said, if you can show me you've changed in the next 6 weeks playing for Auckland, I might give you a chance in the All Black trials. And thankfully for me, I did. I just took everything out of my life again. And that's when you look at the great All Blacks, or any All Black actually, because you don't survive if you don't do this. If you're totally focused on what you do, it's the most important thing in your life. and you need to take everything else out of your life. And I think the year before I'd got cluttered with other things that were distractions, and and that's why you need to have the right partner in life when you're an All Black, the right children, to understand that being an All Black is the most important thing at that time. And that's literally what I did. And I got, as I said, fitter, faster, stronger, totally focused. And Laurie, unfortunately for Laurie, there was no one else. His man got injured in the All Black trial, Mike Brewer. And I can remember Bruiser walking off the field, and he was the captain of the probables, and I was the captain of the possibles. And Bruiser walked off, and I can remember him saying, he said, "Fitzy, my calf's blown, I'm gone." And I was thinking, oh God, if his calf's blown, that means that I could be captain. And we went, in those days, they named the team straight after you would have been there, Nisbett, I think it was in Napier. And it took them about 2 hours debating. And I can remember Ernie telling me after, we said, the only thing we were debating, Fitzy, was who was going to be captain, because Laurie did not want you as captain.
So all that, having said all that, how did you get on with Laurie through that period, right through 92 to 95?
I found, especially that first year, really challenging, because I didn't really want to be captain. I just wanted to be the hooker and be the best player I could. And having the responsibility of captain was just something that did not sit with me very well. I didn't like public speaking. You'd know better than anyone. There's both some of those terrible speeches I had to give in 92.
Everything's changed.
Yes, I just used to be, honestly, thinking about having to talk to you guys after the game, having to make the speech after the game, was just things that weighed so badly on me. And I can remember I think it was the night before we played Ireland in Dunedin in the first test in 92, and there was a knock at my bedroom door, and it was John Sturgeon. And Sturge came in and he said, "Fitzy, I'm going to have a cup of tea with you." Oh, yeah, sure. Come and had a cup of tea. And he said, "How are you enjoying this captaincy gig?" And I said, "Oh, Jesus, Sturge, I'm bloody hating it." And he said, "You know why?" I said, "No." He said, "Because you're not being yourself." He said, "You're trying to be somebody else. Just be your bloody self." And it was probably the best advice I ever got. And I was very lucky I had Foxy, JK, because I couldn't talk to Laurie. Laurie wouldn't let me talk. I'd write all these notes down before sitting in my bedroom thinking, right, what can I say at this team meeting? And I'd have all the scrolls of notes that I was going to say to inspire my troops. And Laurie would speak for 20 minutes before we went to training. And I was thinking, right, now it's my turn. And he'd look at me and he'd go, "On the bus." So it was once again tough love, and it took me probably 2 years to feel comfortable.
So 93, a Lions tour, and as it turned out, you were captain against a guy who turned out, and he probably was at the time, a good mate of yours, Gavin Hastings.
Yeah, Gavin had. We didn't think in '87 after we won the World Cup, went back to the university club and to win the Gallagher Shield. We didn't think 4 World Cup players was enough, so we invited Gavin Hastings to join us, and he had a great time. So we had 5 World Cup players in our team in '87 and won that. Just to not forget that in '92 also, Nisbett, we went from Australia, we went straight to South Africa.
Yes.
Which was like, for me, that was a dream come true. I never ever thought that I'd go to South Africa as a rugby player, let alone the captain of the All Blacks, to play against that great organisation. And that was really, really different times, and they were so excited to have us back in that country. That was a great trip to play against them at Ellis Park. And it was some of my childhood heroes once again. Nas Botha, Dani Herber played in that game, scored a couple of tries. But yeah, that was a wonderful time. And then in '93 to play against the Lions, which as All Blacks, there's a lot of great All Blacks that never played against the Lions. But to play against the Lions is probably one of the great shirts that I have in my collection. That I really treasure. It's such a great organisation.
We'll talk about South Africa more because it crops up in the next couple of years. But just to touch on '94, a couple of things that happened in '94. One, Jonah Lomu burst onto the scene. The other was when you had your ear bitten by Johan LaRue. Did you ever have a chat with him later in life about that? Did you ever converse with the bloke about it?
We actually had a beer after the game. And as Dad always says, there's whatever happens on the field, make sure it stays on the field, and have a beer with your opposite number. So I actually had a beer with Johan after that, and then everything happened. He got banned for 17, 18 months. So, we didn't obviously talk too much during that time. I remember seeing him at Kings Park at one of the games there, where he was just a fan. And we sort of had a quick sort of chat. It wasn't too long. And then, ironically, his first game back was against I think it was the Super 10 final, and he was playing, and so we snuggled up against each other. But yeah, it's just one of those things that that shouldn't have happened, and. Just obviously was disappointing. I still feel sorry for Stu Wilson, who I said, Stu, after the game, he was interviewing me, and I said to Stu, I don't want to talk about this. Just don't talk about my ear getting bitten, please. And he went, yeah, sure, Fitz, that's no problem. And I can still remember the producer in his ear. I could hear him yelling at Stu as blood was dripping down onto my collar. Ask him about his ear. And Stu's like, yeah, anyway. So yeah, that was a really interesting game. You guys did really well. Ask him about his ear. And Stu never asked me, which to his credit. But
classic. I mentioned Jonah Lomu, and that brings me to 95, the World Cup. And Lomu was huge. In 94, very young, came through in 95, and what a tournament the All Blacks had.
I think I look back to 92, and I can still remember sitting at the Poenamo and Laurie saying to us, in 4 years' time, we'll be playing a World Cup in South Africa. And I still remember thinking, God, that's 4 years away. Why are you talking about it now? He said, we need to be the fittest and fastest team in the world to be able to compete on the high veld. So this is what we're going to do over the next 4 years to make sure we're fit enough. And I was saying, God, that's strange. And then obviously Jonah came along, and I remember seeing him in 93 Nisbett, I think, when we played Australia, and the schoolboys were playing before us, and Jonah was playing number 8. And while we were watching them at Carisbrook there, Jonah scored 4 tries. And I can remember saying something, who's that number 8? And they said, oh, it's Jonah Lomu. Like, bloody hell. And little do we know that in 9 months' time, he'd be playing on the wing for us against the French. And they exposed him a bit. And, we were developing this game plan to be the fittest and fastest, because we were going to have 2 nippy wings that were going to score tries, Jeff Wilson and Eric Rush. Because Jonah, that camp we had in Taupo, Jonah just couldn't load fitness. And with little did we know this major kidney disorder. But then Rushy got injured, and Jonah came in and just set the world on fire. And, you look through those games, the Irish game that we played, the Welsh game, and then even against the Scots in the quarterfinal. We were just playing a very simple game, high-tempo game, and just created the space where Jeff and Jonah had so much space, and the defensive systems didn't know what to do. And then it all sort of came to a head against the English, really, that just, to score 4 tries. And Jonah would be the first one to say, he said, look, it wasn't me, it was you guys creating the space. And which, when you look at that team in 95, it was a pretty special team. And I think the success of that team probably came through in 96 more so probably than 95. But he, Jonah, as you know better than anyone, he was the most humble man, very shy, loved the All Black jersey. And what he did in 95, that will never, ever happen again, that a player become a global superstar, and he was a global superstar in all sports in the space of literally 5 games.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can't leave 95 behind without talking about the final. It's all been said before, Fitzy, so I'm sure you're not going to shed any new light on it. But how were you in the build-up to the game, and then the game itself? I had the dubious honour of interviewing after the game, and I must say you were at your humble best, even though you must have been feeling absolutely despondent. But it was a hell of a day, wasn't it, in Johannesburg?
Yeah, I think we'd done everything pretty well through that tournament. I remember Louis Lake saying to me at the start of the tournament, it was the president of South African Rugby, he said, Sean, all I want is for South Africa to play the All Blacks in the final, and I'll do everything humanly possible to make sure that happens. And we had a brilliant tour, really, with that, the way we had played, the hospitality that we had, and we were just in a nice little bubble. There wasn't huge expectation on the All Blacks. So I think we went into the tournament rated sort of 3, 4, even 5 in the world, after the failures of '94. So we just went about our job, went down to Cape Town, played the game of our lives. And there was a bit of history there in terms of what happened in '93. So won that, came back to Johannesburg. And I always look back, Nisbett, in life in terms of if we'd done things differently, would the result have been different? And we wanted to immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of Johannesburg, which I think was probably a mistake. I can remember waking up in the morning at our hotel because we flew straight back after the game in Cape Town. Sunday morning, opened the curtains, and there, draped down the building opposite it was, "The Bokke is going to kill you." And that was sort of the tone for the week, really, the real siege mentality. And I actually saw it in New Zealand in 2011 with New Zealanders against the French, how the country had gathered this momentum to make sure the All Blacks, didn't beat the Springboks. And it was difficult. We couldn't go anywhere basically without the bus being stopped because of Jonah. And maybe we should have gone to a game farm out somewhere and just kept in our little bubble and come back on Thursday. But we wanted to mix and mingle with the locals, and it was probably a mistake in hindsight. And ironically, when we did close our bubble on that Thursday, we had lunch together. The first time we'd actually had lunch in our own team room. And on Friday morning, I think sort of 16 of the 21 guys couldn't get out of bed. And Pine Tree can't get out of bed. We were in trouble. But that's, it was just unfortunate. We'd sort of gone about our business. And I think by Saturday, we didn't have a team run on the Friday. We literally went to the stadium and sat down because, no one could train really. And by Saturday, I think it was Goldie was about the only one that was still sick. But everyone else was, I think, ready for the game. And, what I think people fail to remember is that it was a great contest. Could have gone either way. Mertz, missed a drop kick in the last sort of 5 minutes by millimetres, and then even an extra time, it could have gone either way. So for me, it was a life-changing experience. Seeing the effect of Mandela, what the influence he had on the Springboks. I always say that Mandela walking down the tunnel wearing France Bar's number 6 jersey. The power that filled them with, and the electricity that came into the stadium. I always look back and think maybe if Jim Bolger had walked down the tunnel wearing my jersey, would that have had the same effect on us? No disrespect to Jim, but I don't think so.
I did feel afterwards, even though they probably were the outsiders, that there was a fair bit of humility around. And Springboks South African people aren't necessarily noted for that, but certainly my feeling after the game, Sean, was that they were pretty humble about it.
Yeah, very much so. I think that they're very similar to us in this way. You've been there enough to realise that we're built of the same things really. And as you just said there, humility is one of those things.
Well, I guess when you got back from '95, well, hang on, before we touch on that, of course. At the end of that tour, suddenly rugby was going to turn professional. Now, just talk us through. I think you stopped in Australia or something strange happened, didn't it? And then there was all sorts of discussions and just talk us through that whole process.
Even the game going professional that week, the IRB announced that the game is going professional. That Murdoch had paid the money, and we didn't really think much about it. I didn't know anything about Kerry Packer. And on the Sunday morning, BJ and I went and had a game of golf, just two of us by ourselves, went and played golf, the River Club in Johannesburg. And I got back from that about sort of 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Mike Brewer came into my room and he said, Fitzy, we need to go to a meeting. I went, what are you talking about? He said, Kerry Packer is putting up another proposal against Murdoch. And that was literally it. And then we came together as a team, and we just basically said that, we've got two proposals on the table, and as long as we all stick together, we'll select the best proposal. And the money was about the same, so it wasn't a money issue. We just wanted to do what was right for the All Blacks in New Zealand. And ironically, global rugby, in 25 years on, we're having probably exactly the same conversation about how the game should be structured.
So your role in all this as captain, did you feel you had a role to play in all this?
Yeah, it was a big learning curve for me, I tell you, Nisbett. My God, I remember Rushy was heavily involved, but all the players were too. It was a massive decision in terms of what we were trying to do, and the New Zealand public or world public had sort of been saying the game needs to go professional. Let's go professional. Let's do it properly. And then as soon as the All Black jersey came under threat by the New Zealand Rugby Union saying, if you guys go with Packer, there'll be no All Blacks, we were like, wow. And then the whole nation turned against us. But ironically, all the players around the world were looking at what was best for rugby. How's this game going to evolve as a professional game? And I think in hindsight, 99% of those players wanted what was best for the game. And, there was a few there that were chasing sort of rainbows and the Hail Marys. But I think ultimately, and ironically, I had, best mates that we were head-to-head against. I remember Rob Fisher, who was chairman of New Zealand Rugby at that stage. He was my university manager when I, first went to university. And, him and I were having to stand off and have our own discussions. But I think at the end of the day, it all turned out well, and hence why I'm trying to get more involved in rugby now, is that 25 years on, decisions that are going to be made now are going to have a huge effect on where rugby goes in the next 25 years. All
right, so the end of 95, all that's kind of been sorted. You were due to go back to South Africa in 96. Now, did you regard that as an opportunity for revenge? Because obviously you hadn't won in 95, but also, as it's turned out, it was the last time that we ever made a major tour to South Africa. So it was important that you actually erased all those memories of being beaten in South Africa so many times that you actually went out and did it.
Yeah, I don't think it was revenge in this, but I can remember driving to the World Cup final, and Rick Salitza was sitting next to me in the bus, and I said, Ricardo, I said, win or lose, I'm going to retire. This is my last game for the All Blacks. And he said, yeah. After the game, we went back to the hotel, and I was having a pint of beer with Kevin Roberts, who I think may have been on the board at that time. And Kevin said to me, he said, Fitzy, he said, you're not going to retire. He said, you have to lead the All Blacks back here next year to beat them in a test series and be the first All Blacks to win a series in South Africa. And I thought, as was the case with Kevin, you'd go into meetings saying, right, I'm not going to do this. And I went into that meeting saying, I'm not going to do this, and blow me bloody down. I thought, well, that's a pretty cool idea. So that's why I sort of wanted to be involved, and to tour South Africa was something that we hadn't done before, and to play them. We played them 4 Saturdays in a row.
Yeah.
The last Tri Nations in Cape Town with that big trophy, and then to go to Kings Park, and we knew we had to win at Kings Park to have any chance. Because we knew going up to the high veld it would be very difficult to win back-to-back games up there. But I look at those 2 games especially, or those 3 games, were probably some of the greatest games I played in. And, coming off that game and up in Bali or up in Brisbane when we beat the Aussies in the last minute when Bunsey scored that try. And I think Nisbett, Foxy might have been commentating with you.
Yeah,
and Foxy said we need to get Mertens into position to do a drop kick. and then with that, Mertz passed it, and away we went.
Yeah,
But yeah, so some great times, and that was Hardy came in after Laurie, and he did a phenomenal job, Hardy, in terms of developing that team. Laurie had been phenomenal in terms of the way he coached us, and a lot of what Laurie had done in those sort of 3 or 4 years, I think, came to fruition in terms of that '96 team. And then Hardy just added a few touches. Cully came in, which obviously was a good change. But yeah, I just thought Hardy did a phenomenal job, and the relationship I had with Hardy was outstanding. He just literally everything off the field is planning, as man management, and organising that tour, which we'd never taken. I think we took 38 players away. We had literally 2 teams, 3 hookers, which we'd never toured with like that before. So it was logistically, and as I said, playing. I think we played 8 or 9 tests in about 11 weeks or something, which hadn't been heard of before.
People often say to me, done a few test matches, what is the most memorable? It's got to be that test in Durban. Now, you played in 92 test matches. Was there any game more memorable than that one in Durban? Not Durban, in Pretoria, I'm sorry, where you actually clinched the series?
Well, we had to, as I said, we had to win that game. Otherwise, we knew we couldn't go to Ellis Park at 1-1. The probability of us winning that was quite low. But no, the quality of the rugby, the way it seesawed backwards and forwards. Francois and those guys say that we keep knocking on the door. The bloody Springboks, they just don't go away. You'd get ahead, and then they'd come back at you and hit you harder. And I often watch that game. Actually, I still haven't watched the World Cup final. I'm not going to watch that. But it's like travelling on Air New Zealand. Yeah, you only see the All Black games that we win. We never have any games we lose. But I just that was probably the fittest I'd ever been. And the standard of rugby. You look at Zinni, you look at Goldie, Glenn Osborne. I can still remember JP coming on, John Preston coming on, and that kick just inside our half when Simon Culhane went off. And I remember saying to JP, I said, JP, Goldie's literally grabbing the ball off me. This is my kick, And JP said, no, I'll take it. I said, well, JP, you've just come on. Do you want to, just play your way into the game? No, I'll take it. And then he got known as the cleaner. Literally came and cleaned it, and off he went. But that was the quality of that team, and probably one of the memories that really stuck in my mind is when we won that game, when we walking off the field, and Jonah and all the dirt trackers were leading a haka, and this showed the spirit of that team, right from number 1 to 36. Was what we needed to succeed over there. Playing 2 games a week was amazing. And I can still remember walking off, and Don Clark, the great boot, came up to me. He was living in South Africa at that time, and he grabbed me and hugged me. And All Blacks in those days didn't really hug each other, and he had tears rolling down his eyes. And he said, "Sean, thank you for being involved in the first All Black team to win in South Africa." He said, "I can go to my grave a happy man," which basically said so much. And a lot of that too, we had to sort of educate the younger guys about what the rivalry was all about, because the Cullies of the world hadn't really sort of grown up watching South Africa play the All Blacks, where we'd gone through that sort of the 70s and early 80s, knowing what the rivalry was all about.
Yeah. Look, it was a memorable moment, all right. So you get home at the end of 96. You must have thought, having decided in 95 that you'd finished, you must have thought at the end of 96, that'll do it.
Yeah, not really. Actually, 96 was. I wanted to carry on. Harty and I were sort of getting on pretty well at that stage. and I had no injuries. I was still playing every game and thought I could still contribute. So no, 96 wasn't a year of thinking I was going to retire. And then ironically, I got injured at the start of 97. I at a blues training, I got whacked in the knee, and that was sort of the start of my decline, actually.
Actually, I'm thinking back on your career. I mean, that was really your first major injury. You didn't have much through a long career, did you?
No, I didn't, not at all. And that injury really sort of stopped me. And I remember I came off. We played at Ellis Park. We played, I think, the Tri-Nations in those days. Played Australia, and then we went back to Melbourne to play at the MCG in front of 100,000 people, and I couldn't literally walk off the plane with my knee. And John Mayhew said, right, we need to go and see a surgeon. And we went and saw this guy Bartlett in Melbourne, who was like the guru of knee surgeons. And he said to me, we said that, obviously, he said, take your trousers off and go and stand over there in front of me. And he looked me up and down, and he started laughing. And he said, you want to play on Saturday? And I said, yes, please. And he went, he said, I don't think you'll ever play again. And I went, oh, God. I went back in the car, and I'm in the taxi heading back to the hotel, and I could always hear Doc Mayhew saying to him, he said, Fitzy, have you got career-ending insurance? No. I said, Doc, I am playing on Saturday. I said, you get me right. And literally that was the start of that decline. And I managed to, I think I played another 3 or 4 internationals, but it was never going to happen. And then in 97, we toured up here again. Harty took me on the good faith that I'd be fit enough to play in the test matches, and I couldn't play against Ireland. And ironically, I didn't play against England the following week. And then I said, give me half a game against Wales or something, and then to see if I'm right. I played half a game against Wales. I walked off the field at Wembley, and I said to Zinzan, I said, Zinny, I said, Jesus, this bloody knee, I can't do the things that I used to be able to do. And he said, Fitzy, you need to retire. And I was like, that's not quite the answer I was looking for, Zinny.
No. Had the injury not come along, would you have tried to get to the 99 World Cup? Was that an aim for you?
I think that was where we were sort of going. In those days, you didn't look that far ahead, but I think, Harty and I were going so well together, I just assumed that was where we'd go. And on that Monday after that Wales game, Harty and I went out for dinner, as we did occasionally. And he literally said to me, he said, you're not playing on Saturday. And I said, no. I said, I'm playing on Saturday. He said, no, you're not playing on Saturday. You're going to retire. I said, no. I said, please, just give me 6 months to get it right. And he said, yeah, I'll give you 6 months, but you're not going to play again. And that was it, basically. And I tried to get it right. And I can remember Martin Crowe rang me on the Friday night before Jane Dent, our good friend Jane, was going to announce that I was going to be playing for university the following Saturday. And Hogan rang me, and he said, Fitzy, he said, you've got exactly the same knee injury I've got. He said, you need to retire. And that was it, basically. And it was the best, once again, may he rest in peace, but that was probably the best advice I got from a fellow sports person who had exactly the same injury. And honestly, Nisbett was the best decision I ever made.
All right, Sean, it's been a great pleasure, mate, talking to you. I'll always regard you as a legend of New Zealand rugby, and so thanks for joining us on the pod.
Thank you, Nisbett. You didn't mention Nisbett when we were in Camperdown, that one night that I'd stolen your shoes.
Yes, good point. You still haven't given me my shoe back.
I think I drank out of it.
Yeah, we might as well explain this. You were going to a function and you'd lost both shoes or one shoe?
I think I'd lost one shoe.
So I gave you one of my shoes and I never got it back.
I'll try and find it, Nisbett, and send it down to you. I might just buy you a new pair of shoes.
No, don't worry, mate. Hey, thanks for joining us, Sean.
Excellent, Nisbett. Thank you.